Here's my spoiler-free review of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I'm gonna start by saying that the director J.J. Abrams delivered on bringing us a good Star Wars movie. Is it better than the prequels? Yes. Is it as good as the original trilogy? Yes. All I would say is that A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back are better movies, and The Force Awakens is just as good or slightly better than Return of the Jedi. So let's just get right into it. The acting and directing in this movie is excellent, ranging from the old actors easily slipping back into their former roles and the new actors bringing their own take on the Star Wars universe while also holding their own with the old original cast. This movie has the same story beats as the original trilogy. It does feel more in line with that trilogy than it does with the prequel trilogy. So that means that it will also have the same story beats of beat by beat of how the story rolls out and how the story ends. Now, is this movie gonna win Best Picture? No. Is it a good movie? Yes. I enjoyed this movie more than I disliked the movie. So I'm gonna be a bit more nitpicky on the things I didn't like than the things I obviously liked. Now, what worked in this movie? The practical use of effects looked great. The playfulness and lightheartedness, sometimes a bit too much at times, but overall, we've never seen that in Star Wars before, and that was quite refreshing. Also, what I really enjoyed was that they did not beat us over the head with nostalgia. Like, yeah, you remember that, right? And you remember this? Yeah, remember that. It didn't play out like a Star Wars Greatest Hits album from the original trilogy. Did it have some beats and some mention to it? Yes. But that's a bit of fan service. Like, remember that? We're not gonna force it in your face, but just know that little Easter, that's there. And that was handled really well. When you're bringing a fresh and modern take to a new generation, especially years after the original trilogy, you need to see old things, but it needs to be this new refreshing take on them, and they exceeded on all fronts on doing that, which I was really pleased about. At first, I felt a little bit conflicted because I caught myself like, oh, but it wasn't like, they didn't do it that way like they did in the original trilogy, but actually thinking about it, it shouldn't be that way. It's a new movie for new audiences and a whole new generation. So I completely understand where they're coming from, and they succeeded on doing that. Now, what didn't work in this movie? So the movie rolls out with a quick, fast pace from the start of the movie all the way until the credits roll. Is that bad? No. But because of that, there's a lot of characters and a lot of character development and a lot of storytelling from the past 30 years before, from Return of the Jedi till now. It did feel a bit overstuffed and over-bloated. I didn't really understand the character motivations with the First Order, and their Star Killer base was essentially the new Death Star. And some of the characters, due to the quickness of the movie, it just felt like they came and went. Again, that streamlines it and puts the focus on the new characters, which is fine. But understanding that motivation and maybe taking out some elements would have made it an even better movie. Now, due to the quickness of the movie, some of the emotional beats didn't land because it just goes from scene to scene to scene to scene to scene, which again, not a bad thing, just being nitpicky, but because it doesn't linger, sometimes it doesn't hit. And when it doesn't hit, you're just like, well, that could have been handled differently. Now, the comedic elements of the movie did feel organic. It didn't feel forced. There wasn't fart jokes, there wasn't this, there wasn't that, there was no Jar Jar Binks. But sometimes it was a bit over the top and was a little bit too playful and too cutesy. But from the start of the movie, which you saw a lot of, it did deviate to the end of the movie. So as the movie rolled out, it started becoming less and less, and that's when I started to enjoy the movie more, and it felt more like a Star Wars movie. Now, this wouldn't be a Star Wars movie without any reveals. Majority of the reveals in the movie do land and do stick. Some of them are handled better than others, but there's one in particular which felt forced, that felt shoehorned into the storytelling, which sort of didn't make sense after you left the movie thinking about it. And some of them you just go, well, that could have been handled differently. Moving on. One of my biggest complaints with movies now, not just Star Wars, is the fact that it never felt like our heroes were in real peril. It never felt like the threat was big enough. And that is due to the motivation of the threat. Anytime our heroes got caught up in something, they quickly got out of it. I never once asked myself, oh, I wonder how they're gonna get out of this. Now, are we cheering for them? Yes. Do we want them to succeed? Yes. Do we want them to beat the bad guys? Yes. Check, 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 check. Now, there is one scene in the movie which completely was a WTF moment to me, and I don't know if anybody else will understand or agree with me, but there's a scene where we see Finn with Anakin's lightsaber fighting a stormtrooper, and the stormtrooper takes out this weapon and does some sort of karate move, and I was just like, what the just happened right now? And I was like, alright, let's just move on from that. Sadly, one of the weakest parts of the movie is actually the music. This is probably the weakest score out of all the Star Wars music. It really doesn't say much because Star Wars is like one of the most iconic pieces of music ever. And I would say that this movie has better music than a lot of other movies out there, but compare it to just Star Wars, it definitely is the weakest. Overall, I just want you to know that this movie does have its flaws. Is it going to win Best Picture? No. Is it a good movie? Yes. I will keep hitting you over the head with how good of a movie this is. Do not put it on a pedestal though, because it does end with a cliffhanger. It doesn't end like Empire Strikes Back, whereas you see our heroes in peril, you don't know what's going to happen next. This movie, the last scene felt like a post-credit scene. Like if they ended it 5 minutes early, it would have been okay. But the fact that they like carried it on, it almost feels like episode 8 should have started where this one ended. And I don't know if I'm okay with that. Now, have you seen it? What did you think? Subscribe and let us know in the comments below. You can also hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. Happy holidays, everybody.